Is Viacom CBS, and by extension Paramount, engaged in some nefarious tax scheme? Or are they just doing their jobs and engaged in smart business practices? Let's see. Renegade Online. So just yesterday or early this morning, depending on where you are, you may have seen this article break from the New York Times entitled SpongeBob and Transformers Cost the U.S. Taxpayers $4 billion, a study says. Oh no. Yeah, right off the bat, the title, and again, this is the New York Times, so take it with a grain of salt for what it's worth. We know where their political persuasions lie. Don't want to get into that. But the fact of the matter is, when you say that having not paid taxes that were not owed is somehow costing the U.S. taxpayer or even paying taxes in general, it makes me laugh every time that I see headlines written like this. But this is the generic drive-by school of journalism that has been around now for decades that we have to suffer through in this country. And it affects the financial and business world just the same as it does the pop media culture world and the video gaming world and the comic book world. It is all predetermined, pre-scripted, cut and paste with a political slant, the same garbage. Viacom CBS's Paramount Pictures, which distributed the computer-animated Action Fest, talking about the Transformers movies here, saved much of that money by licensing the international rights through a complex strategy designed to avoid paying U.S. taxes, according to a study published on Tuesday by the Center for Research on Multinational Corporations, a nonprofit group funded in part by the Dutch Ministry of Foreign Affairs. It's common practice for multinational corporations to take advantage of tax shelters. The report offers a rare look at how one company has pulled it off. And it goes into, some details about Viacom CBS. Not going to go through all that. Here's the meat and potatoes of it. Since 2002, Viacom CBS and its predecessor companies, Viacom and CBS, separately before they merged, together avoided paying $3.96 billion, allegedly, in U.S. corporate income tax through a system that involves subsidiaries in Barbados, the Bahamas, Luxembourg, the Netherlands, and Britain, according to report. Much of the $30 billion in non-U.S. royalty revenue brought in by the company's film and TV franchises such as SpongeBob, Star Trek, and Mission Impossible have not been subject to corporate taxes, the study determined. Again, allegedly. Viacom CBS disputes the findings, I bet they do, saying in a statement that the study was, quote, deeply flawed and misleading and that it demonstrates a fundamental misunderstanding of U.S. tax law. Yes, it clearly does. It's filled with mischaracterizations, material omissions, and numerous false claims, the company said in a statement. Viacom CBS fulfills its tax obligations in all 180-plus countries and territories we operate, and all of our revenues, including those identified in this report, are fully taxed in the relevant jurisdictions around the world, including the United States as required by applicable law. Now, this is very simple. All these companies, the size of a Paramount, CBS, or Viacom, all of these companies employ armies of lawyers and CPAs, board-certified tax attorneys. They even hire out third-party firms with board-certified tax attorneys and CPAs and former IRS agents to design this kind of stuff. And not in violation of the law, but using the law and finding where in the law it allows them to do what they do. Believe me, Viacom CBS or Amazon or Google or Apple or any of these other giant companies out there that do this every day of the week, they cross their T's, they dot their I's, they go through everything they need to go through to where they feel legally and financially and fiscally comfortable doing this. Part of this is again, this is a, you have to look at what else is going on in the news. And let me back up. I find it a little funny that, or it's sadly ironic, I guess, if Viacom had done this a couple of years later, they might not have done it at all. Part of the reason was up until 2015, when Viacom was changing and things were moving around and all this stuff back then, the United States had one of the most oppressive corporate income tax rates in the world. Over 30, it was 34%. I think at one point it was at 38%. First and second place in terms of highest amount of corporate taxes. So of course these companies are going to do anything and everything they can to find ways to reduce that tax burden through legal means. Okay? Through legal means. And sometimes that means transferring pieces of property to other entities overseas. The article goes on to say other such things, suggesting that Viacom CBS added that, quote, its overall effective tax rate was 32.6% for Viacom between 2006 and 2019, 33.8% for CBS in that time span. And here it is. This is the part right here. This is what this is all about. The study on Viacom CBS's tax structure has come out weeks after the proposed President Biden 15% minimum tax on overseas profits for U.S. companies, an effort designed to keep other countries, from competing with one another by lowering their tax rates. The suggested global rate is part of a larger plan to overhaul the tax code that would raise corporate income tax in the United States from 28% to 28% from 21%. Why is it now 21%? That was the previous administration, President Donald Trump, and the Congress that he had at the time cut the corporate taxes almost in half, reduced it, or about 40% reduction on that. Why was that important? Because Viacom CBS and Paramount and Amazon and Apple and all these other giant companies out there, all these large and giant cap companies, the reason they do this is because of the oppressive tax rates in the U.S. and they go elsewhere. The whole point of the previous administration's change to U.S. tax code, especially in the corporate income tax rate, was so that companies would not feel the need to go build these other corporate entities in foreign markets to shelter their income, especially income coming from those foreign markets. Because remember, this is about international distribution rights for these properties, that they wouldn't have to do that. That money would feel more comfortable coming back home and being taxed domestically as a U.S. company here with U.S. domestic corporate income tax rates. And another thing on corporate income taxes, folks, before you get bent out of shape that these big companies aren't paying their fair share and blah, 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 got news for you. Corporations don't pay taxes to begin with. There is no corporation out there that prices a product to sell or a service to sell to you, the consumer, without building in a requisite amount of profit to satisfy the projected taxes on that profit. So, for example, you go out to the store and you buy a widget for $100, and the profit margin on that widget is $30 for that company. They know that, at least before the Trump tax code changes, about 30% of that profit, or $10, let's call it 33%, $10 of that $30 profit is going to go to Uncle Sam. So they know that they're only going to get a $20 profit on that, but they really want $30. So what do? They raise the price to $110 or $113. So you pay the corporate taxes, folks, not these companies. The companies are going to get their corporate profit margin to return to their shareholders, which, oh, by the way, the shareholders that they're complaining about here, they're you. You got mutual funds, you got a 401k, you got investments, you're a shareholder. That's you. But let's look at this study. Where's all this coming from? Where is all this coming from? What is this research center? Let's take a look, shall we? A study published by the Center for Research on Multinational Corporations. It's a nonprofit. Don't you love that everybody gets to hide behind a nonprofit? Because when you say it comes from a nonprofit, doesn't it give you that warm, fuzzy feeling like there's some unbiased entity that has come up with a completely objective piece of information for you to review? Yeah. Well, let's see about that. So this is SOMO. This is the Center for Multinational Research. It's in the Netherlands, which is where Viacom CBS has this foreign entity where they distribute their some of their IPs from, like, as they mentioned, Transformers, and I believe Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles was also part of this. And some of the complaints, we're not going to go through the report, it'll take too damn long. But, Viacom CBS, a self-described fundamental content company, reaches, 700 million consumers, 180 countries, about 24% of the company's total revenue stems from content licensing outside the North American market. Through the shifting of IP licensing rights from country to country, Viacom CBS has been able to avoid paying billions of dollars in taxes in several countries, blah, 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 blah. One of the things that gets discussed between this and the New York Times article, as if this is like any kind of metric, is that, some of these companies that they have set up, and again, it's not just Viacom CBS. There's lots of them out there. You can pretty much throw a dart at anybody in the S&P 500, and you're going to find this kind of stuff if they operate in many different markets, like outside of the U.S. Many of these companies, many of these corporate entities don't even have a single employee. So, since when is that a requisite for a legitimate business? It's called a holding company. There's hundreds of thousands, if not millions of them in the U.S. right now, and they more and more get formed every day. You know what they do? They hold property. So, for example, let me put it this way, something that everybody can kind of understand. You have a primary residence. You live in your house with your family. And let's say one day you decide to go out and buy a new house, and you want to keep your old one to use as rental property. Or you go out and you buy a little house for rental property to get rental income. More likely than not, you're going to be advised by your CPA or your legal professional, your lawyer, to go ahead and establish an LLC, a private business entity, a limited liability corporation, to hold that asset. Why? Legal protection. Tax advantages. It's not loopholes. It's tax code. It's the law. Okay? So, same thing with this. You create a corporate entity to hold these pieces of intellectual property for legal and tax reasons. Nothing new. It's happened for hundreds of years, if not longer than that. So what they say in the article, for almost 2 decades, Viacom CBS has been using the Netherlands to avoid paying corporate income tax in the U.S. Good for them. Good for them. From 2002 onwards, this multinational mass media conglomerate has been sub-licensing television rights to third parties and consumers outside the North American market via the Netherlands. In total, at least $32.5 billion in revenues have been collected by the company's Dutch subsidiaries during the period of 2002 to 2019. So what they're saying is, over the 17-year span, they've avoided paying $4 billion in U.S. taxes. And I'm sure that does not also include, for example, if the IRS decided to investigate this, take them to court, win, they'd also be tacking on probably another $4 to $5 billion in penalties and interest. So you're probably looking more like a tax bill if this is correct, which I really don't think it is, although this is still too early to tell. But you're looking at probably $8 to $10 billion in taxes is what they're suggesting would be owed once you factor all the penalties and interest in. So who is SOMO besides just the name? Let's see. Center for Research on Multinational Corporations is a critical, independent, non-for-profit knowledge center. Oh, I'm sure it's independent and non-for-profit, yeah. Since 1973, we have investigated multinational corporations and the impact of their activities on people and the environment. Oh, starting to sound like something. Let's see. We provide custom-made services research. We strengthen collaboration between civil society organizations. In 3 ways, we contribute to social, environmental, and economic sustainability. Oh, boy. Let's see. As a center of knowledge on key issues, we drive analysis and pursue strategies aimed at social and sustainable change. We work on this in 4 program teams. Economic justice. Oh, boy. Yeah, economic justice. That's starting to sound like a lot of this language is starting to... Let's see what economic justice means to these guys. I wonder if they have a thing that says, look, they do. They do. Today's economic system is driven by shareholder value and the interest of large corporations. It maximizes their profits, often ignoring the social and environmental cost. The current globalized world does not offer a sustainable level playing field. And as a result, corporations are caught in a race to the bottom. They want to contribute to a fair economic system in which corporations and investors contribute to financing public goods and services. And governments and institutions implement adequate inadequate checks and balances for social. Did you get it? You get it? Did you get it? Did you get it? Did you get it? It's just another radical left wing, big hairy faced guys that wrote this book. It's this here. I'm not going to say it on YouTube because algorithms and stuff. So what you have is one of these organizations right now that is starting to go out there and pound the hammer. It's being fettered out to places like the New York Times, which, again, to people like Somo, is like the paper of national, reputation in the U.S., which is a laughable joke. They haven't been for, God, I don't know how long, probably since before I was born. And yeah. And I don't think it was any accident that in that same New York Times article, again, that we get mention of the proposed 15% tax on foreign earnings. Look, here's the thing. And one of the things in the article, if I can find it real quick, it brings up, it talks about it's not fair. We read it earlier. It's not fair that different countries are competing by lowering their tax rates. No, that's exactly what we need. That is what is healthy and necessary for genuine, real economic growth. Period. Is competitive free market forces, not just in the U.S., but around the world. And if the Netherlands wants to step in and offer a company like Paramount Viacom CBS, hey, you guys come over here, you set up your international distribution house here in our country, and we'd love to have you. We're going to, you'll get a much lower tax rate here for distributing those assets than you will back in the U.S. The U.S.'s response should not be, well, let's jack up, our tax, and let's punish Paramount. No. Your response should be, shucks, what did we do wrong that these companies, Paramount, Amazon, Apple, they are moving giant portions of their financial operations overseas to other countries? Why are they doing that? Why don't they want to be here? Well, maybe it's because the system of taxation you have set up sucks. Maybe it is far more advantageous for them to go overseas and do it there. And again, to say that they're engaged in some kind of nefarious goings-on is ridiculous because, again, I will say it a second time. These companies employ and contract armies of lawyers and CPAs, board-certified tax professionals, board-certified attorneys, to scrutinize every single aspect of when a maneuver like this happens. And this just doesn't happen overnight. They set these things up over years it takes to put this together. And if they felt at all like, well, this isn't going to work because the IRS is just going to come knocking on our door and fine us, twice as much as what we would have owed in taxes to begin with, they ain't going to do it. They're not going to do it. Because companies like this, they're not mom and pop shops, right? They can't just hide behind the house. They can't hide under the covers. Companies like this, companies like big, large, and giant, market cap companies. Again, the Amazons, the Googles, the Apples, the Netflixes, the you name it. Whatever. They're under constant scrutiny when they file their taxes every year. And you're telling me that for 17 years they're filing taxes and they were doing something wrong and the IRS just missed it? See, the whole point of this article is not that they are in trouble. The whole point of this article and the Somo research report is to basically push the notion of they're not paying their fair share. It's the same argument we've heard from the same people for decades, and it's getting tired and old, and this is just another bucket of garbage. They're following the laws like we all do. We all file taxes. We pay what it said we owe. We use every advantage that the tax code affords us to try to assuage the amount of taxes that we pay, because that's what good common sense says. That's what good business sense says. That is what good fiscal and financial sense demands that you do. And if you're not taking advantage of it, well, shame on you. If you had a choice, if you're sitting down doing your personal income taxes this year, and you said, well, I can either pay the federal government $5,000 or I can pay them $2,000, both of which would be perfectly legal. Which option would you take? You'd take the $2,000 option. How would you do that? You would use whatever advantages that you have available to you under the Internal Revenue Code to reduce the amount of tax burden that you have. What's wrong with Paramount doing it? What's wrong with Viacom CBS? This is a giant nothing burger. I'm sorry. I think they're going to try to make news out of this. I think you'll see you'll see a bunch of punks in Congress that'll jump up and jump on this to get some screen time and to get some Twitter time. You'll see the Twitterati and the Twatsies go out there and start pounding this out. But at the end of the day, good luck. This is just stupid. This is just beyond stupid. Unless they can actually come up with something that's they really actually violated some U.S. tax code here. But what they're doing is they're trying to set this up to demand that there be change, that there be a global tax, that there be basically that there be collusion. They want collusion between multiple countries to say, let's all set our tax rates here so that there's no place left to go for any of these companies. That's the ultimate goal. So, anyway, that's it. This one ran long, but had to be said. I'm tired of watching stuff like this. Again, not trying to get into politics on the channel, but when it has to do with entertainment and entertainment properties, yeah, we're going to get a few of these videos from Valiant Renegade, guys. Y'all take care.